Somewhere in rural China, around the year 1200 AD, a peasant farmer walked out to the edge of his property every morning and did something that no agricultural textbook in America will ever teach you. He looked at his pond, he checked the water color, he watched his ducks move across the surface, he pulled a handful of excess plants from the shallow edge, and then he went back inside and ate breakfast. That was it. That was his farming. His pond grew thousands of pounds of protein every single year, fed his entire family through floods and droughts and wars, and asked almost nothing in return. 800 years later, you are buying fish at a grocery store that was caught in the ocean, frozen, shipped across 3 time zones, and sold to you at a markup that would make that Chinese farmer laugh out loud. What happened between then and now is not an accident. It is a story about what gets remembered and what gets buried. And more importantly, it is a story you can reverse starting this weekend in your own backyard. Let me take you back to where this really begins. Not with Fan Li and his ancient treaties, not with the Tang dynasty emperors, but with a flooding season somewhere along the Yellow River several thousand years ago. Seasonal floods receded, as they always did, and left shallow depressions in the earth. Fish, specifically carp, were trapped in those low spots. Some farmer, someone we will never know by name, noticed that if you deepened those depressions just slightly and packed the edges with clay, the fish did not just survive. They thrived. They reproduced. They were there whenever you needed them. This was not farming in any way we would recognize today. There were no inputs, no schedules, no systems. It was pure observation, partnering with what the land was already trying to do. That observation quietly evolved over centuries until, by the time China's Tang dynasty came to power in the 7th century AD, fish ponds were woven so deeply into village life that historians described them as a defining feature of the landscape. And then something happened that accidentally created one of the most sophisticated food systems in human history. The Tang Emperor's family name was Li, the same sound as the common carp, Li Yu, in the Chinese language. Whether out of genuine reverence or political theater, the emperor banned the farming of common carp across the entire empire. For a civilization that had relied on carp as its primary freshwater protein source for over 1,000 years, this was a crisis of the highest order. But peasant farmers did not starve. They did what people always do when the resource they depend on disappears. They innovated under pressure, and what they invented was extraordinary. Instead of raising one species, they began raising 4 at the same time in a single pond. Mud carp that fed on bottom sediment, silver carp that filtered algae from the middle water column, grass carp that consumed surface plants, bighead carp that ate zooplankton near the top. Each species occupied a completely different ecological niche in the water. There was no competition for food. There was no waste. Every organism in that pond was consuming something that would otherwise go unused and converting it into protein. The system was not just productive. It was self-reinforcing. The more fish you had, the more fertilized the water became. The more fertilized the water, the more algae and plankton grew. The more algae and plankton, the more fish you could carry. It fed itself. It balanced itself. It was, without anyone intending it to be, the world's first true closed-loop food ecosystem. This system spread through Chinese agriculture and held for centuries. When Marco Polo and other early European travelers documented China in the 1200s, they noted fish ponds as one of the most remarkable features of the landscape. Some of those ponds were already centuries old at the time they were being observed, and were still producing thousands of pounds of food annually. Nobody was buying feed. Nobody was managing water quality with chemicals. The system simply ran. And then European settlers came to America and brought cattle, pigs, and chickens instead. Animals that required constant feeding. Animals that required fencing and veterinary care and infrastructure and daily labor. The idea of an edible pond that fed itself was so foreign to that tradition that it never took root. By the time the 20th century arrived, ponds in American backyards were decorative. Koi palms for the wealthy, ornamental fountains for suburban homes. Nothing that actually fed anyone. The knowledge did not disappear exactly. It was more like it was placed on a shelf no one ever reached for. Until the 1960s, when a small group of fisheries scientists at Auburn University in Alabama started asking what would happen if you actually applied those ancient polyculture methods to American species. The lead researcher was a man named H.S. Swingle, and what his team documented in those small test ponds changed the way a handful of permaculture thinkers understood backyard food production. Forever, ponds as small as 1,000 square feet, roughly the footprint of a modest above-ground pool, were producing up to 350 pounds of fish per year under basic managed conditions. Compare that to a quarter acre of cattle pasture, which produces around 200 pounds of beef annually and demands constant feeding, veterinary costs, and significant infrastructure. These small ponds were producing more protein in less space with a fraction of the inputs. The studies were published. They were cited. And then, quietly, they were ignored by every agricultural extension office, every land-grant university program, and every government food initiative in the country. Because the moment a family installs a productive pond in their backyard, they stop buying protein from the industrial food system. And the industrial food system, valued at $200 billion annually in the United States alone, has no interest in helping you do that. But you are watching this. So, let's build it. The thing most people misunderstand about a permaculture pond is that the fish are not the system. The fish are one piece of a four-part living machine, and if you understand all four pieces, the whole thing clicks into place in a way that feels almost too simple to believe. The first piece is the ducks. Traditional Chinese polyculture almost always integrated waterfowl directly into pond management. And the reason is biological elegance. When ducks swim, they stir up bottom sediments and push nutrients up into the water column. When they defecate, and they do this constantly, they are adding nitrogen directly into the ecosystem. That nitrogen feeds algae, the algae feeds zooplankton, the zooplankton feeds small fish, the small fish feed larger fish. The ducks, meanwhile, are eating insects, aquatic plants and small organisms from the pond itself. Everything feeds something else. A small flock of 3 to 5 khaki Campbell ducks will also give you somewhere between 800 and 1,700 eggs per year, depending on conditions. Research shows that ducks with regular access to a pond ecosystem can forage up to 30% of their own nutritional needs from the water. You are cutting your feed costs while they are fertilizing your food supply. That is what stacking functions looks like in practice. The second piece is the plants. Aquatic vegetation is not decoration. It is the filtration system of your entire pond. Cattails planted along the shallow edges pull excess nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water so efficiently that municipal wastewater treatment facilities use them at scale. A ring of cattails will do more for your water quality than any mechanical filter you could buy. Water lilies shade the surface, which drops water temperature in summer and cuts evaporation. Submerged plants like hornwort release oxygen into the water during daylight hours, which is critical for fish health in warm weather. And then there is duckweed, which is perhaps the most remarkable plant in this entire system. Under good conditions, duckweed doubles its biomass in less than 48 hours. It absorbs nutrients from the water at a rate that rivals commercial filtration technology, and your ducks will eat it as fast as it grows, creating a self-renewing food source that costs you nothing and keeps the water clean at the same time. Research into aquaponics has shown that properly selected aquatic plants can remove up to 90% of the nitrogen waste produced by fish. The plants clean the water, the fish stay healthy. You do almost nothing. The third piece is the fish. For most Americans,
Algae bloom in the sun.
easiest
Zooplankton
and most
feed on the
legally
algae. Juvenile
straightforward
fish hunt the
options
zooplankton,
are
smaller fish.
bluegill
A catfish
and
engulfs the
channel
bluegill.
catfish. Bluegill grows slowly, reaching harvestable size of around 6 to 8 inches in approximately 2 years, but they require essentially zero management after stocking. Put them in once, and they reproduce on their own indefinitely. Channel catfish grow faster, reaching 1 to 2 pounds within 18 months in a well-fertilized pond. Tilapia grow fastest of all, reaching 1 pound in as little as 5 to 6 months, and a pond stocked with 50 tilapia fingerlings can yield 40 to 50 pounds of fish in a single growing season. However, tilapia cannot survive water temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and are outright banned in certain warm climate states due to invasive species concerns. Always check your state fish and game regulations before purchasing fingerlings of any species. The fourth piece is the bacteria. You will never see them, but they are the backbone of everything. Beneficial bacteria convert fish waste ammonia first into nitrites and then into nitrates that your plants can absorb. This nitrogen cycle, once established, maintains itself indefinitely. You are not managing a farm at that point. You are stewarding a living system that manages itself. Now the build itself. For a family-scale setup, you are looking at a total investment of roughly $400 to $600, depending on whether you dig by hand or rent a small excavator. The liner alone, if you need one, runs about $1 to $2 per square foot for EPDM rubber that will last 20 to 30 years. Fingerlings run $20 to $50. Ducklings, $30 to $60. Plants and miscellaneous supplies another $50 to $100. That is your entire startup cost for a protein system that will produce food for decades. Choose the lowest point on your property where water naturally collects after rain. Fighting your land's natural drainage is a battle you will lose slowly and expensively. You want at least 6 hours of sunlight daily, but not unbroken direct sun all day, which overheats the water in summer. Mark out a footprint of roughly 10 feet by 15 feet, with a center depth of 4 to 5 feet.
800 years later, you are buying
Create a shallow shelf about 1 foot deep and 2 to 3 feet wide around the perimeter. This is your marsh zone where your plants will root. The deeper center is where fish shelter during temperature extremes. If you have heavy clay soil, you can seal the pond the way it has been done for thousands of years. 6 inches of wet clay compacted by walking on it repeatedly and left to cure. If your soil is sandy or porous, use the EPDM liner. Fill with water, and if you are using chlorinated municipal supply, let it sit for a full week before adding anything living. Chlorine off-gases naturally, then introduce life in stages, and this order matters. Start with plants, cattails and irises on the shallow shelves, submerged plants like hornwort in the deeper zones, floating plants like water lettuce or duckweed on the surface. Let this sit for 2 to 4 weeks. The plants need to root, and beneficial bacteria need time to colonize every surface of the pond. After a month, add your ducks. 2 to 5 for a small pond. They will take to the water within hours, and within days you will see the whole system come alive. The water will cloud slightly as they stir the bottom. This is normal. This is the ecosystem waking up. After another month, add your fish at around 50 fingerlings per 1,000 gallons of water. They will vanish into the depths immediately, and you may not see them again for weeks. Do not panic. Do not add more. They are there, growing in the cool, dark water, doing exactly what they are supposed to do. For the first 6 months, your job is almost nothing. Watch the watercolor. Pull duckweed if it starts to completely smother the surface. Top off the water level during dry stretches. That is it. No feeding schedules, no chemical treatments, no intervention. By month 6, you will start to see flashes of silver when sunlight hits the water at the right angle. Your fish are visible now and approaching size. By the end of year 1, you will have fish ready to harvest. Your ducks will have been laying eggs for months. By year 2, the fish are reproducing on their own if you leave a small breeding population. By year 3, you are not running a project anymore. You are simply harvesting from a living system that has woven itself permanently into the fabric of your land. If you are in a northern climate, winter is simpler than you think. Bluegill and catfish enter a dormant metabolic state in cold water and survive under ice for months without feeding. You simply need to maintain a small opening in the ice for gas exchange, which upon de-icer costing around $40 will handle automatically. Tilapia must be harvested before water temperatures drop below 50 degrees or brought indoors. Ducks are cold-hardy by nature and will continue laying through winter if given basic wind shelter. A 3-sided structure with straw bedding is all they need. They are there, growing in the cool, dark water, doing exactly what they are supposed to do. For the first 6 months, your job is almost nothing. Watch the watercolor.
Algae bloom in the sun.
Duckweed if it
feed on the
starts to
algae.
completely
Juvenile fish hunt
smother
the
the
zooplankton,
surface.
smaller
Top
fish.
off
A
the
catfish
water level
engulfs the
during
bluegill.
dry stretches. That is it. No feeding schedules, no chemical treatments, no intervention. By month 6, you will start to see flashes of silver when sunlight hits the water at the right angle. Your fish are visible now and approaching size. By the end of year 1, you will have fish ready to harvest. Your ducks will have been laying eggs for months. By year 2, the fish are reproducing on their own if you leave a small breeding population. By year 3, you are not running a project anymore. You are simply harvesting from a living system that has woven itself permanently into the fabric of your land. If you are in a northern climate, winter is simpler than you think. Bluegill and catfish enter a dormant metabolic state in cold water and survive under ice for months without feeding. You simply need to maintain a small opening in the ice for gas exchange, which upon de-icer costing around $40 will handle automatically. Tilapia must be harvested before water temperatures drop below 50 degrees or brought indoors. Ducks are cold-hardy by nature and will continue laying through winter if given basic wind shelter. A 3-sided structure with straw bedding is all they need. On the legal side, in the vast majority of U.S. states, ponds under 1 acre on private property require no permits and no government approval.
Vary.
You are
Check your
collecting
state's
and
fishing game
managing
site.
rainwater and groundwater on land you own. Fish species regulations vary by state and are worth a 10-minute review of your state fish and game website before you purchase fingerlings. But in most cases, no one's permission is required to build this. This is what that unnamed farmer along the Yellow River understood thousands of years ago, before anyone had words for ecosystem management or closed-loop agriculture. The land wants to produce food. Water wants to cycle nutrients. Biology wants to find balance. Your job is not to force any of that. Your job is simply to create the conditions and then step back. 10 years from now, the system you build this season will still be running. The fish will have reproduced through multiple generations. The plants will have spread and deepened their root systems. The ducks will have cycled through and been replaced by their offspring. And you will walk out to the edge of that pond on an ordinary morning and do exactly what that Chinese farmer did 800 years ago. You will look at the water, you will watch the ducks, you will note the color of the surface, and then you will go back inside and eat breakfast, knowing that your family's protein supply is alive, self-sustaining, and completely beyond the reach of any supply chain, any price spike, or any system that has ever tried to make you dependent on it. The knowledge survived. Now it is yours.